So let me tell you, from my perspective, what surviving success is. It's overcoming complacency and consistently challenging yourself. And if you can't do that, then you could find yourself in a situation where whatever success you just achieved, whether it's monetary or something else in your life, you're doomed to fall back. So surviving success would be not only knowing the things that prevent your growth, but doubling down as you're climbing that wall of success or increased base camp on the mountain. How do you keep moving forward? What are the questions that you ask yourself? And listen, if you're making some really good money and extra money, what are you doing with that money to make the world a better place?
Well, it's funny. You and I met quite a little bit ago, and we got a chance to reconnect, which I'm excited about. I want to know one thing specifically as we kind of dig in a little bit. You've been in the financial services industry for a while. You've done very, very well in business as an entrepreneur, business owner, and everything.
Yep.
One of the things I know you're passionate about is making sure that people understand finances at a very deep level. And most people aren't even doing the basics. So how did you get into that field? Why is it important? That kind of stuff.
Beautiful question. So for me, I grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey, 75,000 people, 3 miles. Everything was concrete. Everybody knew each other's business. Everything was about, really surviving the schoolyard. Having friends and being able to keep your mouth shut was always an important thing. My dad was a police officer who worked 3 jobs, also struggled with alcohol. My mom was also, and I have a book coming out, Surviving Success. And my mom was a domestic engineer. She had been in a car accident, was on prescription pain medicine for a long time. And in my early years, I'm the youngest of 4. She was in a institution where they did some shockwave treatment on her brain and some other things. I'm going in and out, Danny, on some other things. And as a result of that, I traveled around a lot as a young kid from different, family members. And my early journey was money scarcity, financial scarcity. I think that stood with me when it came to wealth wounds.
Yeah.
And understanding how people, make decisions suboptimally when it comes to their money, time, freedom. I believe that, from that perspective, it really had a lot to do with my first 25 years in life. I eventually was able to get sober, but during my high school years, I didn't drink. I just played basketball. St. Peter's Prep was the high school I went to. And I played basketball. That was my identity because I had I have 2 sisters. One that was a complete drug addict by the time she was 16, heroin addict. She got sober, but then eventually passed away. The best athlete in our family, hands down. And then I have another sister that I married into a family in Jersey City, Bob Hurley, who coached St. Anthony's High School for 50 years, arguably the greatest high school coach in history. He has 2 sons, Bobby and Danny. Bobby played for Duke, won 2 national championships, and Danny just coached UConn to a national championship. So that hierarchy that I was around early on, when I come across the Randy Garns, when I come across the David Meltzers, guys like yourself, I had seen early on what it looks like in the behind the scenes version of what the public would later see when it came to the success that they had. So I got the benefit of both. I know what success looks like when no one's looking, not just when it shows up when everyone can see it. So that was always something that stood with me. But then I went on my own journey with drugs and alcohol from 18 to 25, haven't had a drink since July 1996. And this all comes back to money, right? Money isn't like, hey, let me get all these stacks of paper with presidents. Money is the feeling it gives us, right? And if you're not right within, Ed Milet talks about this with financial temperature. It's amazing. If your thermostat, if you're not right within, you're not going to be able to not only survive the success if you're able to achieve it, but you can come back down. Tony Robbins talked about that when he had his first wave of success, where he then gained 40 or 50 pounds and was really, down to his last $1,000 before he made his next breakthrough. Yeah. And I think that for what I stand for is not only money mindset, process, self and influence mastery, and how to make money. Yeah. How do you survive what those early years look like when the money comes your way? So you don't have to be like a professional athlete where 80% go bankrupt because they weren't ready for the money, whether it was induced, whether it's just not understanding how money works. So what we've created, it's not out yet, is a digital course, a financial education course, a 4-hour course. It's going to tie into the book Surviving Success. And then once you know all that, it's then how do you monitor and measure, diversify within and amongst asset classes? Is there a tool that, you could put your accountant, your financial advisor, your fiduciary, your insurance agent, your trust officer, which some would call a fractional family office, but a lot of people can't afford that. I know versions of me can't afford that. I want to not only speak to the ones that can, but the ones that can't.
Yeah.
I'm not just looking for the $100 million person, although, I love to talk to them, but I'm also looking for my mom and dad. I'm looking for me and people like me and the way I grew up.
Yeah. Well, about 70% of the population is how we grew up, right?
Yeah.
They're operating from, and I never heard this term before until you just mentioned a second ago, wealth wounds. I want to break that down a little bit because I find that a lot of financial behavior is totally subconscious. So talk to me a little about wealth wounds.
So wealth wound is, or sudden wealth. Well, a wealth wound is, hey, if I made an investment 10 years ago, like for example, I invested in a boxing promotion. So my first wave of financial success happened in 2008, 9, 10, and 11. 7 figures each year, couldn't handle it emotionally, stayed sober, but on some deep level, I felt like I didn't deserve it. One of those investments was into a boxing promotional company, right? It had all the makings of why it would be good, but there was no research. I thought it was going to change my life. And I thought just because I did it, now I'm going to get cash flow. And, you find out it's not going to work. And then all of a sudden you can't be gun shy when other opportunities come your way. So the wealth wound would be able to overcome that mindset that not only led to that investment, but also, listen, and you, Stephen, maybe you know this or not, I'm not sure, but entrepreneurs, for me, I run into a brick wall like before I figure out what's going to work.
Yeah. I always say I can get there faster.
So the version of me 10 or 12 years ago got gun shy. And the reason why is because I wasn't really truly right within. You know what I mean? I didn't know that until afterwards. And when I say right within, dealing with how I was brought up, dealing with my family's relationship with money, how it was handed down to me. I mean, listen, I'm in college and I found out my mom and dad put a credit card in my name. I didn't know about it. And all of a sudden it was like an American Express credit card that they started using. I wasn't aware of that, so that's a wealth wound, right?
My dad did the same thing with light bills, with a Progress Energy bill.
Yeah. It's a violation, right?
Yeah.
I had a paper out in 5th grade till 8th grade. I think I had like $1,500 saved up in it. And my brother, who was 12 years older than me, may he rest in peace, he took care of me, by the way. Just, I want to be clear about how this story goes, but I had no choice. I had to give him my piggy bank money so he could buy 2 suits for Wall Street. Now, I'm like 12 years old. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't sign up for being a person that was going to financially support people in the house. Like, I didn't know that was the rule. It wasn't even said. It was just, that's the way it was. So I got other things, but I never got that money back. I never got that back in. So that's a wealth wound. Those are just little examples. And I think a lot of folks, when they don't address the wealth wounds, they then act that out on themselves later on. If they're lucky enough to get financial freedom, they start to expect certain things just because that happened to them when they were little.
Yeah. My family used to say family helps family. And then I recently started telling people that nobody is entitled to your wealth. Nobody is.
Family. Well, I want to know what like, does that mean I'm putting up 100 grand to your 1,000? Is that how that works? Like, what's the breakdown of that help? Like, I'd rather teach somebody how to make money than just give it to somebody.
Oh, you're 100%. You and I both, because you and I both lived out similar stories in the grand scheme of things. And going back to that wealth issue or the worth issue, it probably took me a decade to say no.
Oh,
or a no, and then to give them a way to make the money themselves.
Yeah. That's a great point. I got sober in 96. I made 12 grand. By the time I was in 2000, I was making like 120. By the time I got to 2005, I was at 700. By the time I got to 2008, I was over $1 million. And from 2000 until the day my dad passed away, may he rest in peace, every call was, can I give him money at some point? And my mom, she's still alive to this day, every call is about if she can get money, right? So my sister, my brother, and my other sister, it was always about how can I help them, and even trying to give them the tools to help themselves. That just, to this day, it falls on deaf ears, So, but I'm very comfortable saying no now.
Yeah,
right.
Me too.
That's not a challenge to me. It's harder for me to say no to people that are in the grind with me, that understand certain things, but there's certain things that I see that they may not be ready to take that next step. Those are more challenging those, or
Yeah.
like having contract negotiations, those are challenging those. Being able to redo contracts, stuff like that is like a new version of what's a challenge for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's so good because I find that this during that gravitational pull, if you will, of going from financial scarcity to financial abundance, there's always a push or pull right there in the middle where I find that people like you and myself and a bunch of other folks, when they go from that one to the other, they are trying to manage expectations of themselves and the expectations of those that are around them. And a lot of times, at least for me, I felt I got to the point they would make me feel guilty or shameful if I didn't chirp in or help in or whatever.
Yep.
And then I realized, wait a minute, they're putting themselves in this position.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like are they working until 10 o'clock at night the way you are?
No.
Right? Are
No.
they doing those calls on Saturdays and Sundays?
No, and the dirt sure wasn't. They sure wasn't doing what I was doing. First 5 years of my business, my first business, which you and I talked about when I was on your show.
Yep.
Was this? It was just grind and hustle. Like put every single dollar back into my business and hope that it worked out.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, year 6, 7, 8, 9, it started to work out. And next thing you know, it's like all of those people that told me I was never going to be anything, all of a sudden, no, you totally no. I always believed in you.
Yes.
By the way, can I borrow $1,000?
Yes. Yes. And the overnight success is always 7 to 10 years in the making, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
And there's nothing, I would suspect you would agree with this. There's nothing more lonely than what we do. It's a lonely journey. It really is, especially when you want to go to that next level. You're by yourself a lot. And if you're lucky enough to have someone ride with you on that journey, that's an incredible thing,
Yeah.
And I'm talking about in the day to day, so as you kind of elevate and you go higher and higher, there sometimes it gets lonelier and lonelier, at least that's my perspective.
Well, I think it definitely is until you actually change your circle of influence.
Yes.
You and I run in a lot of similar circles now and have been. And at least I can say that those people are phenomenal human beings.
No question.
One of the things I love about them all is they're coming from a heart of service, but they also have very defined boundaries.
Yes.
Talk to me about the importance of having defined boundaries in your circle and in your mentality.
Yeah, I think to your point, that those defined boundaries are even important with your family, right? So, but people that work with you, your team behind you, I like to say, define the problem at all times and solve. Don't just give me problems. Tell me solvable terms to everything that's happening. So it's about accountability, and that's part of boundary making, right? Mm-hmm. How do I hold someone accountable in my work that I really care about that is starting to slip in certain different ways? What are some of the things I could do without, losing patience or being able to come across in a way that may be suboptimal to kind of paint that picture of, hey, you're starting to slip, here's why. And by the way, that always comes down to surviving success, because each person has their different layers of success, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to get to this level, I got to go through this level, and I got to go through this level first. So these are challenging conversations. To your point, though, when you get around the Meltzers, the Garns, some of these other folks, they have what I want, right?
Yeah.
They're up there. Right. So then I'm like, wow, this guy gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He's got a sleep coach. He's, compounding. I've never heard anyone compounding energy before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's a real thing. And everyone's process mastery is at a place that I'm not at right now. So it's like, if I'm a rookie in the NBA and, the veterans know all the things you need to do to play 5 or 10 years, that's where I'm at. I'm just trying to learn what the pieces are doing. And that's part of the boundary setting.
Yeah, which is amazing. One of the things I love about what you do in your work is it's not just that you're focused on elevating and getting to another level. You try to bring people with you to the next level.
Yes.
But more importantly, you also try to work with the people who used to be where you are.
Yes.
Or were. You were.
100%.
And I know one of your passion projects historically has been helping people understand the fundamentals to get to the place where they even need a fiduciary.
Yes.
Right? Talk to me about some of the fundamentals that every person should be operating from if they ever want to have hopes of achieving of wealth.
Yeah. So that's a great question, Steve, because I think that comes down to blocking and tackling. That comes down to fundamentals, and that comes down to basics. And once you've cleared the debris of wealth wounds and understand money mindset, the real estate between your ears, and how to really surround yourself with folks that can empower you. Mm-hmm. Now that that's happening, you also have to learn the importance of, okay, who do I talk to when it comes to my money, time, freedom? How can I turn decades into days and really tie into what my core values are when it comes to money? I was sitting with somebody today, and they specifically said to me, why do you make money? What are you trying to get if life could be the way you want it to be? And that life for me would be to do what I want, when I want, how I want, with who I want, without any money or time constraints. Like that would be an ideal life for me, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm going to get there, or if anyone's brand new right now, the first thing that I always think is important is you have to understand the importance of having your educators, your 5 educators. And that's what I mean by fiduciary, insurance agent, trust officer, estate attorney, and accountant on the same page. Well, how do you do that? Some people can't do that right away. So one of the things that we've created in that model is we have a technology that we use from Fidelity. It's called the Epic Wealth Builder, where it puts everybody's financial data on one landing page, but it could also put their financial educators. So now all of a sudden, if somebody has a 401k, and if somebody has an after-tax account, if somebody has an insurance policy, well, we could put all those professionals on there. And now that means that the person either wants to work with all their other people and have them connected, or they're looking for a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that you, as the individual investor, aren't hit with a bunch of different opinions from a bunch of different people based on a bunch of different things, but not really able to bring that all together for the purpose of what your outcome is. It's important that you get that in your world, because if you do, what'll happen is your decision making will go from emotional timidity or a gut level hunch to decisions based on logic, math, and science. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the real magic is. And then economic winter comes, and it's going to come. It comes, it goes, it comes and goes. It's going to come next year. We got an election year. You'll be high stepping through that mindset wise, because you're not going to be worried about what the Joneses are doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's a couple things. So first of all, I think that's brilliant in the standpoint that wealthy people operate from data.
Yep.
Impoverished people operate from emotion.
Yep.
Wealthy people buy when markets are low.
Yep.
Or impoverished people buy when markets are high.
Yep.
So there's this essence of, because of the lack of understanding, you're buying and selling at the wrong time, or you're not operating from the basic fundamentals of being, largely debt free, not having, letting compound interest work for you versus against you, and those clear fundamentals. I know in a couple things that we want. It's interesting. When I was growing up, I was made to believe that wealth was evil, or being wealthy was evil.
Yep, me too. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And then, but yet the folks that we've been associating with for years now are very wealthy people in their own right. They can afford to fly private and do all this kind of stuff, but nobody knows how much money they give away except for their close friends.
Yep.
And the reason I say that is because I feel like it's important to break that cycle. I was meeting with a small group of people when I was out in Utah recently, actually at Randy's office, trying to teach just a basic fundamental class on finances. And I had to challenge each and every one of them is, why do you think money is evil? Why do you think being wealthy is evil? And I've discovered it's because that someone along the way decided to tell someone else no when they went to borrow money for like the 100th time.
That's right.
So talk a little about that, kind of that shift of what money really is versus what people presume it is.
But dude, that's a dynamite question. I think that once again, money is a feeling, it's a charge, it's an emotion, right? And with that comes rejection. So if you hear the word no, no one wants to hear the word no, right? Mm-hmm. And hearing the word no goes back to the simple principle of you feeling rejected, even if it's from a girl that you want to date, right? Yeah. Or if you ask mom and dad if you can get this toy, or anything with no, the energy is just, it's terrible. And if it sits with you without understanding how to overcome it, even if you tried to borrow money for the 100th time and it was said no again, well, that says tell a different story about whatever you're trying to borrow the money for, right? Mm-hmm. But you and I both know if there's a good idea, and you and I both know that if you could demonstrate not just resources where someone's going to give you money, but be resourceful, and be able to leverage that currency, that emotional equity, that relationship equity into a business strategy, well, then it becomes you're not borrowing money at that point. You're leveraging your relationship that's going to provide the emotional currency that's going to allow you to move the ball forward. These are two different mindsets, right? Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about right now. If I think it was I don't know if it was Biggie Smalls or Kanye, but they said if you change your style up, watch the money pile up, right?
Yeah, that's right.
if you keep asking and they keep saying no, you got to change your style up a little bit. But the truth is, it's what are you borrowing it for? Why are you borrowing it? Are you borrowing it just because you're just trying to get by on a certain situation, or is it for a purpose that's going to make you and the world a better place?
Yeah. I think it always comes down to the lens of compounding. Are you spending it or are you compounding it?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? When it comes down to it, I know that you got a brand new book coming out, Surviving Success. It's an interesting play on words, but I think I also had to survive my own level of success at least once, and God willing, I won't have to go through that trial again. But
not like the fifth time right now.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about what it really means to survive success. Like, what's the pitfall of success, and why does that get us off track? How do we not, you know what I'm saying? How do we keep moving forward versus having to fall back?
Awesome. So let me tell you from my perspective what surviving success is. It's overcoming complacency and consistently challenging yourself. And if you can't do that, then you could find yourself in a situation where whatever success you just achieved, whether it's monetary or something else in your life, you're doomed to fall back, right? You're doomed to go to a place where your thermostat is at a lower number. So for me, for example, high school basketball, I was a pretty good high school basketball player. By all accounts, third team all county, Hudson County, New Jersey, first team all county, had 2 players that went to the NBA. So and I didn't start drinking yet, just so you know, I started drinking that season. By the time I got to college, so if I started drinking, let's say in March of my senior year, by the time I got to September of my freshman year of college, Division III school, I was checked out. Matter of fact, my whole goal in college was to be fun and cool, straight up.
I think that's every dude's calling in college.
Actually did it, and to the tune of like 4 years later, 1.65 GPA. I never finished college, and fraternity, like I had the time of my life, but it set me on a path where all of a sudden I'm in my 4th year. There's people graduating, and now I'm going back to Bayonne to become a bartender, right, or landscaper. And no offense to either one, but I couldn't survive that success of basketball. I felt like I wasn't worthy. And then alcoholism, which is in my family, kicked in, and it kicked in a big way. And then I got sober, right? So when I got sober, and I'm talking 12 steps recovery sober, and I've never, from day one, I never told anyone else what they had to do. I knew right away, and I embraced, let me just clean up my side of the street, and I can't do nothing about yours kind of thing.
Yeah.
In AA, I remember thinking, wow, there's no one in AA that makes money. And I don't know if I could do this. And then I wound up getting a sponsor who was really successful in business. And that changed everything for me because what I did at that point was listen to what he said. What he said was, and I'll keep it simple, read steps 1, 2, and 3 every day on the bus to Wall Street there and back, which was an hour each way. And I did that for the first year. And that foundation, which is really a God-centered foundation, and it really came down to turning my will over to God, showing up every day. And at that point, I was making $400 a day on Wall Street. And I was working from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And I learned every no you could possibly learn. There's really 6 different versions of it, but it comes. And I began to anticipate no's. And then I crafted a presentation on influence by Robert Cialdini's book on how to overcome those no's. And then all of a sudden, I went from that to opening 6,000 new accounts over the phone 3,000 new accounts over the phone in 6 years.
Yeah.
Came down to 400 dials, 80 contacts. Of the 80, 30 people would let me get past the first minute. Of those 30, I would get down to 3 that would say yes, cold leads that would give me their name, date of birth, social security number, we'd buy stock. And that taught me everything about influence and sales, right? That game that I just shared had me go to 7 figures. However, I stayed sober, right? Started to get comfortable, stopped doing what got me there. Complacency set in, but the lagging effect was still kicking me big checks, right?
Yeah.
So by the time I got my last big check, I was a year and a half removed from what got me there.
Yeah. Such a slow fade.
Oh yeah, for me it was. Yeah,
for sure.
And this is eventually going to lead to how you and I know each other. But 2012, 13, 14, I was going through just chaos. Didn't drink, thought about killing myself one time for 1 hour. I figured my family would be better, my wife and kids would be better with a $10 million check than me not being able to do what got us there. That was my limiting belief.
Yeah.
And I read Tony Robbins' book, Money Masters of the Game. And what was so great about that book besides the education and the fiduciary point and why that's so important when it comes to your money, fees and everything else and diversification, was it was obvious to me that everyone that bought that book was going to go to creative planning for a free appointment.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that heard him on stage was going to go from that stage to an appointment with creative planning, which was the RIA.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I want to model that. And I go to a Tony event in 2017 by myself for 4 days. Didn't even like, I hugged a couple of people, rubbed the shoulders a little bit. Did half.
That's always my least favorite part when he does this stuff. It's like, I don't know you.
And I left there thinking, that's it. I'm gonna make it's over. I've arrived, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't realize I had to put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right. So by the time I get to September, I meet Sean Callaghy, who's giving a presentation to doctors as a lawyer and talking about this formula of influence. And I became friends with him. And then soon after that, I said, listen, why don't you become Tony Robbins and I'll become creative planning? Mm-hmm. And during that time, we then eventually met Chris Crone, who's an influencer in the real estate space. And Chris Crone was, so Sean's influence language of sales, which is dynamite. Mm-hmm. Chris's process mastery of social media and community that loved him became the perfect mix of how we went from 8 to 3,000 or 2,000 appointments a month. And now, how do I survive that success? Right? Well, what if Chris somehow just shuffles off this mortal coil, or Sean? So Epic and Rob got to create their own social media, their own messaging, their own educational course, their own book, their everything. Yeah. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, dude. And I love it, man. You guys have worked really, really hard. Obviously, I think, the hard gets refined through difficult stuff. We learn more about ourselves. We learn more about what I think we become more appreciative when the success does happen. We have a certain level, a whole other level of gratitude.
You need contrast.
Yeah, man, that contrast is incredible.
And by the way, Steve, let me ask you this, because you're dynamite. I wish I could sell it to people. Like, how do I give contrast to people? How do my privileged 3 kids, how do I give them the struggle that I grew up in? Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm being real right now.
Yeah. So I would say that my rule of thumb or my principle that I go by is there's only 2 ways to learn in life. Only 2 ways. You either learn by the experiences of other people, or you learn by the experiences that you get as a person. Yep. One of them is more painful than the other.
Yes.
Right. So my first mentor poured into me, gave to me, it's, Mr. Meyer, we talked about him when I was on your show. But I did half of my life not listening to Mr. Myrick. So I got to experience the pain. And then once I had an appreciation for the pain, I was able to listen to the principle moving forward. So I would say, from my perspective, it comes down to, how do you want to learn? You're going to learn it. How do you want to learn it?
That's a great question. And do you offer that to people that are close to you?
Oh, of course.
Like that specific question? Like,
absolutely. Because everybody, and you get this too, man. Everybody wants to know, how did you get from X to Y to Z? Like, how did you get from here to there? Like, it's like, well, I sacrificed a great deal. I got my heart broken 1,000 times. Yep. I gained it. I lost it. I was busted up. I busted my knees. And I'm like, okay, so you want to do that? Yeah. And most people are like, no, I don't. Yes. Okay, well, in that case, listen to my advice. But I also, Rob, one of the things that I do specifically for me is if I give advice a few times and no one takes advantage of it, I stop giving the advice. I only give my advice to hungry people. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever got caught in a trap, though, where you're a little bit codependent? Because that happens from time. Oh, yeah, especially early on. Okay. Because when someone changes your life or gives you the information and the skill set to change your life, you want everybody to have that same experience. Everybody. Yep. 2 out of 10 are actually going to be worthy of the investment because everybody else is going to be further behind on the journey. You're right. So the only way you know that is by testing it a little bit. Said, okay, well, here's step 1. Yep. Did you do step 1? Don't ask me for step 10 until you do step 1. I did this with a young entrepreneur of mine. He's basically my son-in-law. For 3 years, he was like, well, how do I build a bigger chest? That's our little inside joke, right? So, because he'd say, how do I do this? How do I do that? I would say, well, do that. Yeah. And then he would do the opposite of it. Yeah. And then he would come back and ask me the same question. Well, do the same stuff I gave you before. Go do that. And he did it. He wouldn't do it. 3 years later, he comes back to me and said, dude, I'm not giving you more advice. Like I already told you to do this, this, and this. You haven't done either one of those things. When you do those three things, then you can come and talk to me.
Yeah.
8 months later, he comes back to me after doing those three things. He made his first $300,000.
There you go. That's it. So yeah.
So it comes down to that pain point, right? At what point is that thorn in their butt hard enough where they actually want to get up and move?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I agree. It's when Tony talks about creating change with people, you got to get leverage on them. Then you got to discover their pattern, and then you got to come up with an alternative.
Yep.
But it's so important to make sure that disruption is so real, and the alternative has to be measured in a way that they own it, not that you own it. And that's always my struggle. Yeah,
man. Well, and look, you're already doing great work. You're on the journey. You're going to do like everybody else. We're going to get healthier and healthier boundaries. So we're going to encircle ourselves with better and better people along the way. I do want to understand, why was now the best time to kind of write the book? What was it about? What's missing in the marketplace right now that you feel like, hey, I have to speak up?
Steve, I think that for me, I didn't time to do the book now. It wasn't done by design. It was really done as a desire to serve and get my message out. And one of my partners here, Alexa Criollo, was very instrumental at holding me accountable towards getting all that out of my head into recordings and being able to have the gentleman that's helping us write it do it. In the past, I would never fulfill on that. And it came down to not so much what time we are in the economy, but really where I'm at in my business life cycle, let's call it, where I think that there's enough experience that I have good proof that I have the opportunity to share a message. And it's just my journey, right?
Yeah.
And it's my journey on what I've learned, what works and what doesn't work. Just trying to send the message out on what has worked for me, but put it into bite-sized information.
Yeah, man. Well, the other thing that kind of makes me also think of this is like, when I write materials or create courses or books or whatever, when I'm doing that, sometimes I feel like I'm actually called to the project. And then when I'm in the middle of the project, I kind of discover who I'm making the project for. Have you discovered who this book is for?
Me, my family, 20, 30 years ago, and anyone like us.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
See, it's crazy that one of the most common truths with success that I've seen is the same thing with the greatest purpose in life that you've heard me talk about before, which is serving the person you used to be.
Yep. And I answered that without even a brain. That was just straight heart in. Yep.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. It's like it's so intuitive.
Yeah.
That I actually believe that's why certain people go through harder things than other people, because I believe they're designed to take back the solutions to an earlier version of themselves to prevent the same level of suffering.
Amazing. I agree.
Maybe one or two of the key principles in surviving success that maybe we haven't touched on yet that you think are just vitally important for people to know about.
Yeah, I think you don't have to go back. I think it comes. I think when we write goals with deadlines and outcomes, and the goals are tied to our why, right? Our true why that makes us cry. It's not so much that outcome; it's what we learned along the way. And if it's tied to continuously serving and contributing, and just not stopping doing that, then I think that the exponential growth would be a beautiful multiplier, because there's no need to stop what you did to get. It's about momentum, right? There's no need to stop what got you to that next phase, and what got you, or at least me, it's about helping others. The second I want to go about myself and I make it about me, myself, and I, everything falls off the rails. So if I already know that, shame on me if I do it again. Like, shame on me if I do it again, right? So surviving success would be not only knowing the things that prevent your growth, but doubling down as you're climbing that wall of success or increased base camp on the mountain. How do you keep moving forward? What are the questions that you ask yourself? And listen, if you're making some really good money and extra money, what are you doing with that money? It's going to make the world a better place, and not just given to the Red Cross. No offense. But like, who are you trying to help? How are you trying to help them? And how could you keep doing that? Like, that to me is where I think you could survive success. Yeah,
dude, I love it. What's one thing that was crazy is it's probably been a year since you and I connected.
Yep.
Maybe a year and a half. And I already see on the other side of this camera a more authentic Rob than even the first Rob that I met. And the first Rob that I met was awesome.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm really curious what's happened in the last 12 or 18 months that has really kind of not shook you, but maybe shook you or shaped you to kind of, because your energy is completely different. I love it.
Yeah, I think for me, dealing with personalities, understanding, understanding that people have lives and what people say matters. Like
Hmm.
everybody is the king and queen of their universe.
Yeah.
And I think like when Oprah talks about she gave the microphone to 35,000 people, the whole purpose of that was to point out what they said mattered, right? So I'm trying to tap more and more into the human side.
Hmm.
Also, as I go through that, I'm also dealing with massive personalities in my business nonstop. And, I'll say to myself, like, listen, what can I learn? These are the questions. What can I learn from this? And how do I make it better? How do I make it more optimal? How do
Hmm.
I service? And by the way, the biggest challenge is if whenever I'm going through something that's real difficult in my life, how do I handle that while I'm going through something real difficult? So I have three kids, right? Two sons and a daughter, and basketball is a dream. And I started this AAU program really for them 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And then this year, when my one guy doesn't want to play anymore, which is fine, but my other guy, who's a really good player, is like he doesn't want to play with the way we set it up, right?
Yeah.
So what happened this year, because he comes from an environment that I never came from, but as I built this out, I went back to my high school,
Hmm.
and my high school is where my parents bounced checks. My high school is where we had no money. My high school is where life was so difficult for me. And once I started helping these kids out in the last, I'd say 6 or 9 months that weren't privileged,
Hmm.
that basketball was their only means, my message to them was like, look, there's 1,000,005 high school players, of which 1,500 get Division I basketball scholarships, of which 30 make it to the NBA, of which 24 go bankrupt. Why don't you now learn financial literacy today, which is we create a financial literacy course through our AAU
Yeah.
program, and understand that if you're good in sports, then you're going to be a good entrepreneur, but you need to learn about marketing and branding. So that human side, helping those kids, has been such a gift. And the other gift was when I went to the Ukraine. Like there was wives in their kitchen with like guns that were 100 years old fighting against tanks. The
Wow.
last thing I want to do is come home and deal with folks that were complaining about all the gifts that they have in front of them. In my office where we've been blessed in abundance with leads, all of a sudden, some of the folks who were complaining the leads weren't good enough anymore. So when I started to see that, I got connected. And as I mentioned, Alexa was helping me out with a lot of stuff in my book, but she and some of the younger folks here were the ones that really began to make me think, wow, I really want to help an agent now that's coming up, because if
Yeah.
I could share with them the challenges that I had, but also talk about, hey, if you're going to work with me, you're going to start doing well, but how do we survive you doing well?
Yeah.
So the combination of all that stuff that's been
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah.
maybe it's a midlife advantage versus a midlife crisis. I don't
That's
know.
right. That's right.
But my perspective is different. And I'm super grateful for that new perspective, and I never want
Yeah.
to go back.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy how you can be, and I know this experience for myself. You can become uber successful in business and finance and whatever. You can do a lot of really good things, but it's not until you're really starting to reinvest your time, your talent, your resources into helping those who are in need but receptive.
Yes.
That's kind of my thing. Is like you're in need, but are you receptive? Are you willing to take the advice? Are you willing to take the steps? Are you willing to follow the strategy? Are you willing to even watch the courses?
Well said, brother.
You know what I'm saying? So
Well said.
what what mechanism do you use now to kind of maybe choose? Because I know I have to do this. Choose um, who is advantageous for you to pour into. Because one of our most limited resources, you and I specifically, and a lot of others, kind of at our current level, is time.
Yep.
There's only so many hours in a day. And I did some math. I told somebody one time ago, they were like, well, I was like, well, how much do you make an hour? They're like, an hour? I make X number of dollars a year, right? A salary. I'm like, yeah, but there's 2,080 hours, workable hours in a given year. If you work 40 hours a week, take your annual income and divide it by those hours.
That's right.
Right. And when you do the math, they were able to say, well, I'm actually not getting that great of a return on my time.
Yep.
So how are you choosing how to get the best return on your time?
That's a great question, brother. Wow. So if I'm gonna start putting some time into either a mentee or a mentor, right? I'll go mentee first. I think it's important. There's a very critical question. Are you willing to do whatever it takes with integrity and, without violating your moral code? And I need to know that answer. And, before I would ask that question, I want to get to know who the person is. And that does take a little bit of time. It's a conversation and maybe an hour or two, but I want to know where they're from, where they are, where they want to go, what are their challenges, and what are their successes. Why, whatever their challenge was, why is that challenge present? Like, what is the pattern in their life that's created this continuous challenge, right? And if I could have that conversation with somebody and say, hey, listen, if we could disrupt that challenge and then say, are you willing to do whatever it takes? That's a good starting place for me, right? Yeah. But then you got to watch up and see, if they show up. You got to. Here's the other thing, Steve, and I know you go through this. You'll have people that'll do everything early on, and they'll get to that level of success, and all of a sudden the rules start changing, right? And that's
more consistency.
Yep, that's where I'm like, well, I've been there, I've done, and I know, and just like you could tell if the pattern changes, what's going to happen 6 months later. You're not confused, and you're trying to tell this person. And the challenge with getting to know each other really well, and it happens a lot here, is that all of a sudden they could say the right things that move the ball forward. And then as time goes on, if you're not careful, that's where you got to retest it. Yeah. If you're careful, you could fall into a situation where that pattern is going to show itself again. Now, if I'm going to have Randy coach me, or if I'm going to have you coach me, or if I'm going to have David coach me, my questions now would be, what are your expectations of me? And then I'd have to sit down and evaluate, okay, number one, can I do that? And then number two, how can I measure my return on my investment? What are the measurables I can look at to see if, in fact, this investment and this time spent is commensurate with everything I'm doing? Yeah. So those are different kind of questions, right? So I'd have to ask those kind of questions. And I think distinctions and sensory acuity, you're brilliant at this. Eskimos have 12 different versions or definitions of snow. Somebody in Las Vegas has one definition, right? Yeah. So how do we get into the distinctions? How do we ask the right questions? And I'll always say to somebody, hey, is there a question I'm not asking that I should be asking? I think because sometimes
that's a wise question most people don't ask.
Yeah. Because sometimes we don't know what to ask. Like that's a real thing. I'll never forget, there was a GA in the insurance business that I worked for, and he said like a whole bunch of blah, 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 like a bunch of different things. And if you know anything about whole life insurance, the big knock is after the first year, there's no cash value, right? So that's every insurance agent is ashamed of that. And that's why they fail at selling it, because they don't talk about that. Now, when we do our stuff, we overfunded so much, there's a lot of money in the first year. But I said to the gentleman, I said, hey, listen, is there a question? Because it was about our compensation. Is there a question that I'm not asking that you're tapping your buddy and you're saying, thank God he didn't ask that question? Yeah. And I'm not working with this guy because of this. And he goes, well, Rob, that's like telling a client there's no cash value after the first year. I said, well, I actually tell clients there's no cash value after the first year. So that's an important question for me. I always want to know, hey, is there a question I'm not asking that I should be asking? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So integrity, compatibility, and consistency.
Yep.
Is what is my three big takeaways that are
better than I did. There you go.
That's what I'm good at. Breaking it down, baby.
Yeah, that was awesome,
man. Dude, I love it. I love hanging out with you and get to spend more time with you. I'm excited about all the success and stuff that you're doing. I'm also excited about this massive shift in you and what you've been doing in this really heartfelt service piece that I can really sense in your heart. Yes. Right. I'm super excited about that. I can't wait to do some more stuff with you, man. Where can everybody find out more about you and Surviving Success?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to email me directly, it's rgill@epicfinancialstrategies.com. YouTube is Rob Gill _epic. Like Instagram is Rob Gill _epic, and YouTube is Rob Gill -epic financial strategies. And once again, if they want to email me, it's rgill@epicfinancialstrategies.com.
Dude, I love the fact you always make yourself so accessible. Love it.
Yeah, love it. Talk to anybody.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on, man. I can't wait to see more shakeout and see you soon with Randy and Dave.
You too. And Stephen, I appreciate everything today. I appreciate this opportunity to spend another 35, 40 minutes with you. Awesome.
Always, dude. Always, man. All right, dude. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks, brother.
I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
Let's build the first distillery powered by renewable wind energy. We gave $1 from every bottle back to different environmental causes. We were carbon neutral. We the first experienced brand new members of 1% for the planet. So